the 24th day of March 2026 on The Explainer tonight. Whose bodies are these? Shock as homicide detectives exhume 33 bodies and several body parts from Kericho's secret mass grave. Between court and hospital, former CS Rafael Tuju admitted in hospital as lawyers battle in court over validity of arrest and charges. Friends, not scavengers. President Ruto blasts opposition leaders over abduction claims as he wades into the Tuju disappearance saga.
Jitokeze tuchukue kura because tunataka mwongozo mpya.
We're not going to make the same mistake again.
It is a youth frenzy. Gen Z prospective voters throng IEBC centers to be listed for 2027 polls. And also, tonight on the eve of the Kenya International Investments Conference, we're speaking with the Cabinet Secretary for Trade and Investments and Industry in the country to speak about the expected outcomes of that important conference and indeed how Kenya continues to position itself as a trade and investment hub for global foreign direct investors. That is coming up on Power Talk tonight. But also tonight we've got a very busy show because across the country a new wave of young Kenyans is stepping forward, organizing, mobilizing and urging one another to register as voters under the Niko Kadi initiative. But enthusiasm alone does not build a credible electoral process. It must be met with equal readiness from institutions. So tonight we ask some simple but important questions. Is the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission ready for this moment? Can every young Kenyan who wants to register actually do so easily, efficiently and without barriers? And of course, as the country prepares for the next election, are we building a system that inspires confidence? Tonight on The Explainer, we are joined by Dr. Alutalala Mukhwana, who is a commissioner at the IEBC, to help us understand what it'll take to turn this surge of civic energy into some meaningful action. That is all on The Explainer, which starts right now.
Live from Citizen TV, this is The Explainer with Yvonne Okwara.
Tonight, we begin our bulletin with disturbing findings from Kericho County. Homicide detectives have exhumed 33 bodies found in a mass grave in Makaburini Cemetery in Kericho County. Government pathologist Dr. Richard Njoroge confirmed that 25 are children, while 8 are adults. The exhumation followed a court order obtained by homicide detectives following the discovery of the secret grave. Gatete Njoroge reports.
Tuesday morning and Makaburini Cemetery was turned into an active crime scene. Homicide detectives from DCI headquarters, who had been pitching camp at the cemetery, began the exhumation exercise. It had been reported that 14 bodies were allegedly buried at the cemetery last Friday. The exercise, which took place amidst downpour in the area, ended at around 6 p.m. However, the findings were more shocking.
The bodies were stacked in gunny bags. We found 7 adults and 25 children who qualify. Some of them are neonates and others are fetuses. So in total, we have 32 bodies. We also found 6 body parts, 4 legs and 2 hands. So those ones we are going to analyze them and we find whether they belong to one individual or many.
With exhumation over, the attention now shifts to the autopsy, expected to commence on Wednesday, to ascertain the cause of death.
Some of these look like they have come from mortuaries and others from hospitals. So, but we are going to determine that when we finish with the autopsy exercise. I am not going to say when we are going to start with the autopsies, because a lot of logistics will be required. It's not a simple exercise and must be done meticulously.
On site to witness the exercise were IMLU officials and activists who have called for thorough probe into the incident. They want IPOA and Kenya National Commission on Human Rights to conduct parallel probe and ensure justice is served if there is proof of foul play.
Lazima ukweli uweze kujulikana. Hawa ni kina nani waliozikwa hapa, walizikwa hapa kwa sababu gani, na wao wenyewe walikufa vipi. That's why we have camped here since this weekend. We have followed through.
Towards operationalization of the National Coroner Service Act 2017, so that these cases of mysterious deaths or unclaimed bodies can be handled in a more professional manner.
Preliminary reports indicated that Nyamira Teaching and Referral Hospital had received a court order to dispose 13 unclaimed bodies at a public cemetery within Kericho County. However, with the discovery of 33 bodies, questions linger on the other 20 bodies, the secretive manner in which the bodies were disposed, and the public involvement in the burial. Gatete Njoroge, Citizen TV.
The High Court has granted former Cabinet Secretary Rafael Tuju anticipatory bail of 200,000 shillings, blocking his arrest and continued detention by the police. The embattled businessman is receiving medical treatment after being rushed from the Karen police station, where he had been initially detained prior to his arraignment for allegedly giving false information to a person employed in public service. Seth Olale with the detailed developments.
A seemingly frail Rafael Tuju was rushed to hospital in an ambulance Tuesday morning. His lawyers, led by Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka and DAPK Party leader Eugene Wamalwa, arrived at the Kibera Law Courts to stop the prosecution from advancing charges against their ailing client. The Director of Public Prosecution alleges that the embattled businessman gave false information regarding his disappearance and abduction to a police officer attached to the current police station.
We invite you, in the absence of Mr. Tuju, not to proceed in any manner.
So the charge before you, on the face of it, Your Honor, I submit, is defective, has no basis of law, and should be rejected.
The mere presence of a charge sheet before Your Honor does not confer you with jurisdiction in the absence of an intended accused person.
You know, we are opposed to the grant of bail in the absence of the accused person. We already, however, had alerted our colleagues that we were not going to oppose bail upon charges.
Tuju's counsel also sought to have the court order his release from police custody while he is still receiving treatment in hospital, a move opposed by state prosecutors.
Even in hospital, he is in the custody of the police. It is the prosecution's position that even pending appearance, he will remain in the custody of the police until and unless we are back to this court earlier.
However, the High Court in Milimani granted the former Cabinet Secretary anticipatory bail of 200,000 shillings, blocking Tuju's arrest and continued detention by the police. Chief Magistrate Stella Atambo saying she will issue directions on Wednesday.
We let it be until tomorrow when this court gives directions on the way forward. Is it so hard for us to do that?
The Chief Magistrate also ordered authorities to ensure Tuju is accorded comprehensive medical treatment. Wednesday's ruling by Chief Magistrate Stella Atambo will determine whether this particular matter will proceed even in the absence of the suspect, Rafael Tuju, who is currently receiving treatment at a medical facility in the capital city. Seth Olale, Citizen TV at the Kibera Law Courts in Nairobi County.
And President William Ruto waded into the Rafael Tuju disappearance and resurfacing saga, accusing the opposition of misleading the former cabinet minister. Speaking in Siaya and Migori counties, President Ruto defended retired President Uhuru Kenyatta and asked those dragging Uhuru's name into the Tuju property row to desist. Stephen Leto reports.
President Ruto was in his fourth and final development tour of the Nyanza region, just a day after former cabinet minister Rafael Tuju resurfaced after disappearing for a day. President Ruto accused those in Tuju's circles of misleading him into self-hiding.
Wanaenda kumwambia Tuju enda jifiche kwa bedroom yako alafu enda sema ati umekuwa abducted. Just imagine. Tuju needs honest friends. Tuju needs honest advice. Asaidiwe. He doesn't need scavengers who are trying to scavenge about the misfortune of a citizen.
President Ruto accused Tuju's friends of taking advantage of his misfortunes for their self-gain.
We want Tuju apatiwe advice so that he can be helped, mali yake yokolewe na yeye asonge mbele. Lakini hahitaji wale matapeli wakora wanaenda kumsumbua mtu mpaka hata wameenda kuleta jina ya Uhuru Kenyatta wameingiza kwa hiyo matope yao.
Wiper Patriotic Front leader Kalonzo Musyoka was first to respond.
Yeye sasa ajitokeze hawe rafiki ya kweli, wacha sisi tuwe mascavenger, na yeye kwa sababu ndiye anashikilia nyama na nyama ni title deed ya dari. Yeye ndiyo voucher anaishikilia. Tunamwambia aiangushe. Akiangusha jamii ya Bwana Tuju itapona. That's all we are asking. Badala ya kutukana viongozi, kuwaita majina ya ajabu ajabu, hatutaki kuingia that space. Hiyo space tumemwachia Mheshimiwa Ruto.
Ati sorry mnasemaje? Na nyatike mnasemaje?
Earlier on, President Ruto was received by Siaya Governor James Orengo in Usenge.
Tumekukaribisha Siaya na urudi. Mimi nina siasa zangu, naomba ukirudi uendelee kurudi Siaya. Wangapi wamekaribisha Mheshimiwa Rais William Samoei Ruto? Wangapi wanasema Ruto anakuja? Tukubaliana na James Orengo. Tufanye kazi ya raia. One term na two term itaamuliwa na hawa raia. Sisi ndio mtaamua. Lakini kwa sasa tufanye kazi ya wananchi.
President Ruto said he is keen to delivering on his promises in the region.
Nasikia kuna watu wengine wanasema sijui no term, wengine one term, wengine two term, wengine long term. Mimi nawaambia jamaa, sio nyinyi mtaamua, ni hawa wananchi wataamua.
Leaders who accompanied President Ruto rallied the region behind the broad-based government.
Wananchi wa Nyanza wameamua 2027 watapatia William Samoei Ruto.
In Trans Nzoia County, Deputy President Kithure Kindiki delivered good news for maize farmers, directing that prices of maize seeds be reduced to boost farmers during the planting season.
Na kutoka leo kupitia amri ya Rais, Kenya Seed Company imeamrishwa ile mfuko moja, ile kilo moja ilikuwa 300 ikuja 260. Ile kilo mbili ilikuwa 600 ikuja 525. Ile 10 kilograms ambayo ilikuwa 3000 ikuja 2625.
Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.
Hundreds of Gen Z youth thronged IEBC voter registration centers in various parts to be listed for 2027 general election. The youth under the Nikokadi initiative is aimed at mobilizing youth to enlist en masse ahead of the 2027 election. The youth say they're determined to have their voices heard, leveraging on the ballot as a powerful tool to shape the country's future leadership. Citizen TV's Ben Kirui has more.
They turned up at Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission IEBC centers armed with the national identity cards, ready to register as voters, as the Nikokadi campaign gathers momentum in rallying Gen Z to register in large numbers with a resolve to push for better leadership.
Siri ni numbers, yeah. So mkuwe kadi wote ndio we get to change the government. We need change as a country. Like we need change next year.
Tunazidi kuurge vijana everywhere across the country, mali huko, jitokeze tuchukue kura because tunataka mwongozo mpya, new leadership na tunataka maendeleo.
Waendelee kuchukua kura. They know what they're supposed to do. Us, we know personally what we are going to do. We're not going to make the same mistake again.
In Nairobi, several centers, including anniversary towers, witnessed the long queues with the Gen Z patiently waiting their turn to formally secure their place on the voters' roll.
What motivated me to become a voter is it's high time we actually stood our ground and took accountability for the future we actually want, voting leaders who will actually work for the people instead of against the people.
A similar trend was replicated across the country. In Mombasa, sections of the youth staged a peaceful march from Treasure Square to the Electoral Commission's offices in Kizingo within Vita constituency. Under the Tukokadi banner, the youth have vowed to sustain the mobilization drive in Mombasa, setting an ambitious target of registering more than 450,000 voters by August. Some saying they desire better leadership as their primary motivation for participating in the exercise.
Why I am here to register as a voter because it has become a duty right now as the country is going in the wrong direction.
Kwa kweli nina furaha kwa sababu at least I feel like now I have my constitutional rights and finally I get to choose the leader that I want na the leader that I feel like atatupatia maendeleo katika Mombasa yetu na katika Kenya yetu kwa jumla.
In Kisii County, long queues were also observed at IEBC offices in Nyaribari Chache and Kitutu Chache South, where a majority of those turning up, many of them students, lined up in support of the Tukokadi campaign.
Mimi nimeona nichukue kadi kwa maana hii nchi tumeteseka sana. Mimi kama mwana Kenya na kijana mdogo nimeamua ya kwamba nichukue kura yangu ili niweze kuachiri mtu kwa ofisi ama nimtoe.
The ongoing mass voter registration forms a part of an enhanced drive to support the continuous voter registration exercise that began in September last year. Ben Kirui, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
And in line with that, a reminder that we're speaking to Commissioner at the IEBC on that very robust voter registration exercise. Dr. Alutalala Mukhwana, who is the Commissioner with the IEBC, will be joining us to speak more on that exercise. Any questions you have, please send them in to the number 22422, or you can find us on X. We'll be taking your questions and comments on that as well. But first, the Kenya Wildlife Service has yet again denied any involvement in the disappearance of fisherman Brian Odhiambo, who reportedly went missing at the Lake Nakuru National Park last year. KWS Director General Erastus Kanga told the Senate Security Committee that the organization's formal records do not have the name of the fisherman. As Emmanuel Tona reports, the petitioners who put the KWS officers to task over the rising cases of abductions and disappearances within the park now want fishing at the lake to be legalized to stop the arrests that lead to deaths.
In defense of Kenya Wildlife Service in an inquiry into the disappearance of 33-year-old Nakuru fisherman Brian Odhiambo,
of this human-wildlife conflict,
KWS Director General Erastus Kanga told the Senate Security, Defense and Foreign Relations Committee that official KWS records so far did not have the name of the fisherman whose disappearance case is still in court 1 year on.
We categorically deny and refuse that there are any people that have disappeared in Lake Nakuru National Park. We have records of all the visitors who have been into Lake Nakuru National Park, and we can table those records here for the last 10 years.
While admitting that illegal fishing has been ongoing at the Lake Nakuru National Park, the KWS Director General said illegal fishers were destroying the park's fence, further putting their lives in danger.
The illegal entry of persons into the park, if they are not using the designated gates, they are destroying and cutting the fences, the electric fence that is protecting the park.
Fish are leaving Lake Nakuru even today to various destinations, refrigerated. An independent research and also be open so that we can have what is actually up to date, not what was then.
The petitioners were seeking a permanent solution to the rising cases of police brutality and killings within the national park have pushed the government to legalize fishing in the lake.
Automatically, that fish is contaminated from the report we have. It's unfit for human consumption. And one of the witnesses actually said the same fish finds itself in the market of Nairobi, Kisumu, and Nakuru.
Can we open up the lake, clean the river, the fish be legal, so that fishing continues?
It is illegal to fish in a national park. We are killing Kenyans. And very soon they will get into various diseases, including cancer.
The details emerge barely 3 weeks after the Nakuru Law Courts ruled that 6 KWS officers have a case to answer over their alleged involvement in the disappearance of fisherman Brian Odhiambo. From the corridors of justice in Nakuru to the corridors of power in Nairobi, the case of Brian Odhiambo continues to raise more questions than answers, even as the Kenya Wildlife Service continues to deny any involvement in his disappearance over 1 year later. Emmanuel Toh, Citizen TV, Parliament Buildings, Nairobi.
More than 300 families from Maembeni village in Kisumu have been rendered homeless after River Nyando broke its banks, sweeping across homes and farms. Similarly, more than 300 acres of crop has been destroyed in Baringo as heavy rains continue to pound most parts of the country. Laura Otieno now takes stock of the deluge of destruction as the government calls on Kenyans to remain vigilant in the wake of heavy rains.
At Maembeni village in Nyando, some residents are literally relocating their houses. The aftermath of the ongoing rains revealed in the carpet of water across the village that has left more than 300 families across Kisumu East and Nyando sub-counties without a roof over their heads.
Sisi wakaaji ya Maembeni, sisi iko na shida kubwa sana. Maji amefiriku paka natoka over ya dike.
Wale walitengeneza dike hakutengeneza vizuri. Wametengeneza tu kitu kama cha kucheza boli. Sio cha kufanya kitu chenye inaweza kusaidia sisi.
In Baringo County, it is a race against time before the skies open once again. Farmers are salvaging whatever remains. 340 acres of maize was destroyed on Monday, with the losses expected to increase should the rains persist.
Wakulima sahi wanakaa na mahindi yao ndani ya maji wakingojea trakta. Wengine wametoa iko barabara wanangojea trakta. So mimi mwenyewe binafsi nimeumia sana. Jamii yetu ya hii Eljomus tumeumia sana. Tunaomba usaidizi.
Sasa tuko na risk. Hizi manyoka sasa hii maji imesumbua. Ile magunia jana ilikuwa imefunwa. Sasa kuja ingia hiyo ndani ya hiyo magunia. Tukibeba ni Mungu tunachunga watu kwa sababu so far so good hakuna mtu aliumwa, lakini manyoka mingi zilipatikana ndani ya magunia sikitafuta fichi.
In Kirinyaga, an unidentified body was retrieved from River Nyamindi. It is suspected that the man was swept as he tried to cross the river, bringing the death toll to 87.
Nataka kushauri watu tafadhali, wacha tukue safe, tusiingie kwa maji kama tujui kuogelea, na wakati maybe kuna nyesha tunakuwa pahali ambapo ni safe. Wakati huu mvua ni mingi.
The Ministry of Interior has issued a notice to residents along the rivers of Sosiani and Tana in Uasin Gishu and Tana River counties to move to higher grounds after the two rivers also broke their banks. According to the weatherman, the heavy rains were expected to resume Thursday to Sunday. Laura Otieno, Citizen TV.
And staying with that situation, residents living in Nairobi West, downstream of the Nairobi Dam, have been ordered to relocate to safer areas as the government begins a plan to demolish buildings along river channels within 14 days. The move comes amid fears that the dam could burst its banks after recent floods. Marking of buildings set for demolition is expected to begin on Wednesday. Some residents are demanding accountability for land officials who approved construction and issued title deeds in affected areas. Willie Lusige with that report.
The Nairobi County government, in collaboration with Nairobi River Commission, held a meeting with residents of estates located downstream of Nairobi Dam, which is at risk of bursting its banks. During the meeting held in Nairobi West, one of the areas hardest hit by the recent floods, residents were informed that no building constructed on riparian land or obstructing the flow of water will be spared. All will be demolished. Residents were also informed that measurement of the required distance from the river and the marking of structures set for demolition will officially begin on Wednesday.
We start with sensitization today on what riparian is and why you have to move out of riparian reserve. Next is going to be marking of the riparian reserve. Haitafanywa leo, inafanywa immediately tukimaliza.
Property owners will be given 14 days to demolish their buildings, failure to which the government will carry out the demolition at their cost.
Na hiyo demarcation team itakupatia notice ya siku 14, 14 days, so that you are allowed to move your structure. At the expiry of 14 days, if you will not have moved the structures, serikali itaingia kutoa hiyo structure at your own cost.
However, some homeowners whose houses were built along river channels insist that officials from the Ministry of Lands who approved the issuance of the title deeds for the riparian land, despite knowing it was part of river reserve, should face prosecution with victims compensated.
Hizi nyumba zote zimejengwa kwa riparian, kuna watu wameapprove. What action is the government doing to hold those people to account? Inabomolewa, hii ingine inajengwa aje.
Residents in the area say they will not oppose the demolition if they are carried out fairly, expressing fears that buildings belonging to influential individuals will be spared.
When it happened 2024, I remember we had the same floods. Our houses flooded. We wrote to you guys and nobody has ever responded. Also, it happened the same. Nobody has even responded to those letters.
Focus is set to shift to whether the demolitions will begin after the 14-day notice period lapses or the exercise will once again stall as it has happened in the past. Willie Lusige, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
All right, we're taking our first break here on the program tonight. Two very important conversations we're having on The Explainer. The first is to take a look at the IEBC's preparedness, particularly at this important exercise of voter registration as young people have mobilized each other, coming out in huge numbers. Is the IEBC ready? Commissioner at the IEBC, Dr. Lutalala Mukhwana, is with us tonight to answer all of your questions in that regard. Also, our second important conversation we're having here is Kenya's investment story and Kenya's investment journey, particularly with the Kenya International Investment Conference kicking off here in the country tomorrow. What are the expected outcomes? Cabinet Secretary Lee Kinyanjui is here on Power Talk tonight. Tonight, CS for Trade and Investments Lee Kinyanjui talks about the expected outcomes of the Kenya International Investment Conference set to begin tomorrow. So on Power Talk this week, we're having this conversation on the eve of the Kenya International Investment Conference 2026. How do you turn investor interest into real deals that provide opportunities for Kenyans in the country? The Cabinet Secretary for Industry, Trade and Investments joins us now. C.S. Lee Kinyanjui, thank you so much for being with us. Let's just start by talking about, this is coming at an interesting time, and we'll speak about where the world is. But how different is this conference? This is the third edition, I believe, the fourth edition. Right. How different is this going to be, or what are some of the expected outcomes of this, having done this 3 years prior?
Thank you for this opportunity. And let me first start by saying that the conference starts tomorrow, which is the 25th, to run up to the 27th. And we have confirmations from across the world, from the Middle East to China, the Asian subcontinent, the Far East, and basically within the African continent. The main purpose of this particular conference is to showcase what Kenya has to offer from an investment perspective. We've had very many inquiries, some coming at their own time, but we thought that it is important to put everything all under one roof, showcase Kenya, and also connect with the world, because we see a very huge interest on the Kenyan investment space. One of the key things that is driving people to Kenya is the macroeconomic environment. You will want to remember that for example, our currency has been able to stand at the 128.29 for the last almost now 2 years. Now, that's not a feat that you find in many of our third or developing countries. You can also be able to, take your dividends or your profits back to your mother country at any one time you require. The central bank will not be there to stop you or regulate you when you want to do this. So there's a lot of good management within the economy that has actually made Kenya quite attractive to everybody. Not to mention that we have also special economic zones. These are dedicated zones where you get tax holidays, you get benefits even in terms of setup, and they become very attractive in terms of getting the foreign investors come. So this is really the conversation that you want to have tomorrow.
Yeah, so these are the sort of the proposition, the investment proposition that you're giving to those who've declared interest. What are some of the key challenges and gaps, even with everything that you've said is attractive right now? What are some of those key challenges and gaps that you're looking to mitigate to give investors even more confidence in the country?
I think when investors look into investing in a country, they have to consider the sum total of everything, not one factor, not say the cost of energy, which may not be maybe the most competitive. But one thing about our energy is that it is available. Even if you go to the rural parts of Kenya, it may be expensive, but available. But you're also working towards ensuring that we also have other alternative sources of energy, including electric. For mobility now, Kenya is actually leading in the region in terms of the EV electric vehicles, whether they are motorbikes for distribution or buses now in Nairobi, we're actually going electric. So energy would be one of them. And I think the other one would just be issues that you would call geopolitical, that have nothing to do specifically with Kenya. But when it comes to the political climate in Kenya, I think there's something that Kenyans don't appreciate. Maybe this is probably the only place in the continent where you can be able to plan on 20 years because you're sure there'll be an election, the transition is okay. I mean, there'll be, all those things. But eventually, the country runs the way it should be. That political stability is a statement that continues to be a major attraction. Not to mention also things like our constitution, where both the government and the citizens are all subject to the law of the land. And that gives comfort and predictability in the investment climate in the country.
Yeah, and, we're talking national, which is important, but how about county level investments?
Yeah.
We're in a devolved system and structure. How to ensure that counties are included in, say, this conference and its possible outcomes?
Yeah. In our planning, we have included the county government and the Council of Governors for that matter, because we believe there's no part of Kenya that is not a county. So if we are to move forward, we want to move forward together. One of the areas we've been trying to look at is how we can be able to have a harmonized sort of licensing regime, because traditionally when you move from one county to the other, there's a bit of disparity, and that's why we came up with a uniform licensing bill, which has now come to law, and therefore we'll be looking at operationalization. So there's a lot of conversation going on at the county level, and I want to commend many of the counties are actually becoming pro-business, including going digital. If you want to apply for your permits, if you want to pay for your licenses, your building license and all those other things. And I think that's really how we would want to work. Last year, we actually launched a county competitive index, just trying to recognize that each county has its own competitive advantage that the others may not have, and that we can be able to learn from each other. So when it comes to the conversation around investments, we want to look at counties as part of Kenya, and therefore making them more competitive is our responsibility, and we're working together with the governors across the country.
Yeah. So conferences like these can sometimes become talk shop, Waziri. Yes. How do you make sure that you have some outcome of deals? What are the expectations that Kenyans can look forward to over the next 2 days or 3 days with this conference?
Traditionally, the people who are coming have had an opportunity to sample some of the things that Kenya has to offer. For example, we have a leather park in Athi River, and this leather park is actually going to be a huge game changer. So we have a huge delegation coming from Italy, trying to look at the possibilities of buying leather locally, converting it into shoes and other leather products. And we have actually converted that entire place into a special economic zone, which means also we have all those incentives that go along with that. So the groups that are coming are also targeted, and they have already looked at the landscape. We expect to sign not less than about $2.5 billion. And that is enough to employ over 50,000 Kenyans in the next 2 years. So I think this is a space to watch. And just to confirm that in the last 3 years, when His Excellency the President has gone out, including to China, to the US, and all these other places that we've been going to look for investors, I would say the conversion has been very good. And we have companies that have come here, others are expanding, others are looking to bring products that were previously not here. Mm-hmm. And we see a bright future for the country. And just to mention also some of the infrastructure that is currently under construction, including the SGR now connecting towards Uganda, is part of the conversation that everybody wants to hear. How do I get my products into the East Africa region? So a well-connected transport system reduces your cost of operation, your competitiveness when you finally get to the market. We are talking of the airports being expanded. That also means that if you have to sell our fresh produce out of the country, we have a bigger capacity. So Kenya is gearing for a takeoff. And I think all these expansions, including at the port of Mombasa, in Lamu, is all part of creating an environment where Kenya can produce not just for itself, but for the continent and for the world. And we've seen, even in the textile space, a lot of interest in that area. So some of the steps we may be taking, from railway to rail, to the port, and also at the HR level, our training of our young people, very well trained and schooled in IT and all the other relevant skills. I think all that makes Kenya an unbeatable country when it comes to investment destination. And these are some of the things we'll be packaging, and we are very hopeful that we'll be able to get tangible outcomes.
Right. And Waziri, this conference is happening at an interesting time in the world. We understand the crisis in the Middle East, the US-Israel versus Iran war. Now, this has affected trade significantly. I mean, Iran is a big importer of Kenya's tea, about $50 million every year. And then there's the meat exports to the Middle East region, which are usually even higher during the just concluded Ramadan season. And we're hearing from them that they're losing about 300 million shillings every week. Waziri, have you engaged these industry players directly?
Yes, let me say nobody planned for this war, so no government really can say we were adequately prepared. But I think at all times it's always good to test your systems to situations such as this. We had COVID before and many other things that could come. But one important thing about Kenya is that we are not a one or two commodity exporter only. So we're in the fresh produce, we're also in coffee, we're in tea, we are in tourism, we are big in ICT, and for that reason, sometimes even when shock comes from one area, it may not be as devastating as if we were relying only on one product. But what have we done? Part of our fresh produce to the Middle East and some of those other countries is being rerouted partly through maybe Egypt, Saudi. There isn't a big problem, so also that can be transported. And I think the good thing, especially for meat, is good to say that whether there is war or no war, people will still eat. So the thing is trying to get to channel the food in the. It may take a little bit longer to get to the destination. But we are still selling part of the food. For the flowers and other fresh produce, it's good to know that even if the produce was not going to the Middle East, the biggest carriers are actually from the Middle East. So whether it's Qatar or Emirates or any other. And therefore, when there's disruption, even our exports to countries like Japan or Singapore and the others can be affected. So there's a bit of rerouting going on. And I want to say that no country has been able to 100% adapt to the situation we are in. But I think Kenya is doing well, but we remain also key because, as you probably know, our PCS, Excellency Musalia Mudavadi, was in India the other day because we're also trying to play at the diplomatic level, trying to find a solution into this global conflict. So I think we are trying to do it at all levels. And I must also say that for our cold chain systems, because fish or flowers and vegetables require a cold chain system. I think this is a lesson that we take, that we need to expand that space. Okay. Whether it's back in the rural areas, at our airports, at our ports, and even our railways to ensure that we build capacity around the cold chain.
Yeah. Would there be are you considering or mapping out some sort of support or intervention for some of those in industries that are currently affected? Of course, we don't know how long this may persist, but it all very well likely could for a period of time. We don't know. Is there any type of intervention or support that you would provide them, considering if you have to reroute, that takes longer, that costs more for the exporters?
I think the important conversation for us is that we are also looking for alternative markets. Just today, we have a delegation from China led by the Vice President of China, and we were signing the zero tariff, zero quota to China. So part of the produce that may be stranded arising from these challenges could also find its way there. So one of the things we really want to focus on is building a resilient market across the world. We also have the COMESA region where Kenya is a key player, and the president is the chairman of COMESA. And on Thursday, we'll be meeting at the conference where we have about 16 countries participating in the Kericho International Conference. And therefore, that simply means that we have opportunity within Africa, within the bigger Asia market, within the Americas, so I think the point is just trying to diversify. And just for your information, we've also called all our diplomats and our trade attaches across the whole world. So there'll be a meeting later this week just to try and tell everybody, wherever you are, if you're in Korea, what can you do to help us channel part of our produce in view of the challenges that you're having?
Right. Lastly, as we close, and just maybe to do a recap on the investment conference, the United Arab Emirates, Dubai to be specific, has positioned itself as the world's investment financial hub. It's taken a bit of a hit now with what's happening in Iran. It's not to say they're not thinking about, how to bounce back better, if you like. Is there an opportunity here for Kenya to position itself as that, considering everything that's happening?
First, we must say that the events happening there are quite unfortunate. I mean, the loss of life and property is not a desirable situation, and we hope that that situation comes to an end sooner than later. But having said that, Kenya is a key player from a tourism point of view, from hosting some of the international headquarters for some of the institutions. And therefore, in the face of all this, we expect that some of those institutions or people who want to go on holiday would be able to consider Nairobi or Kenya, among others. So I think we'll continue to position ourselves, and this has nothing directly to do with the war, because this is something we've been doing over time. Even the planning of this conference is about a year old, so it's not really about the war, but we want to see beyond. And we also believe a world at peace and a world trading together where people work and trade freely is a better world. So Kenya seeks to have that. But in the meantime, I want to confirm that some of the incentives we have placed, for example, in our financial systems, that you can be able to bank in Kenya, even if you're not a Kenyan and you're not even a citizen. Some of the things we have instituted, such as no visa for Africans, simply means that you don't really need to work too hard to find your way in Kenya, and the investments are stable. If you look at some of the real estate developments we have here in Nairobi and also Mombasa and many of our other big cities, about 40 to 50% of them are being bought by people from outside Kenya. That just shows you the confidence that foreigners are placing on Kenya. And I think this is something we really need to be proud of.
Okay.
And we are here to keep the momentum.
All right, indeed. Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary in charge of Investments, Trade and Industry, Lee Kinyanjui, on the eve of the Kenya International Investment Conference, discussing the opportunities and the proposition that Kenya presents for the world. That's Power Talk. Thank you for staying with us. Now, a major snarl brought traffic to a standstill along Mombasa Road on Tuesday, leaving motorists stranded for hours between Emali and Salama. The gridlock is said to have been triggered by an accident involving two trailers that occurred Monday night, partially blocking the road but worsened by overlapping, leading to complete blockage in some sections. Motorists expressed frustration over what they say has become a recurring problem along the route, with those transporting perishable goods warning of huge losses as delays drag on.
Niko hapa kuanzia saa 3 ya asubuhi mpaka saa hizi, na hii jam nasikia ilianza jana usiku. Sawa, kwa hivyo serikali shughulika na hii barabara.
Shida imetokea kwa muda, si kwa leo. Kila siku tunang'ang'ana na hii serikali. Tunaomba kila siku serikali tuwekee barabara nyingine.
Nimetoka UG naenda mpeleka mananasi Mombasa. Nilikuwa natarajia kufika Mombasa kitu saa 10 jioni hapo, ama saa 10 saa 11 hapo.
Toka bana kula tuja kula barabara nzima hii. Watupanulie barabara bana.
Fuel shortage has been reported at several petrol stations across the country, with motorists scrambling to find supply as uncertainty grips the sector. But what is the real situation? Is there an actual shortage, or are dealers withholding fuel? And could prices spike soon? Melita Oletengis reports.
Many petrol stations nationwide are running dry, turning away motorists instead of serving them. At this station, drivers were forced to leave without refueling, opening their tanks, met by an immediate closure by attendants. The cause of the shortage remains unclear, though speculation is rife that some dealers could be hoarding the product. At stations still stocked, long queues have formed as drivers rush to fill up in fear of tougher days ahead. Motorists say the situation is already biting hard.
Mafuta imekuwa challenge kwetu. Petrol station ukiingia unaambiwa hakuna, ukiingia ingine unaambiwa hakuna. So we are wondering hii mambo itaendelea hivyo mpaka lini. But I'm hoping the government will sort out.
So hii 500 napiga hesabu ya trip kama 2 ama 3 kama ni fupi fupi. So nikishamaliza trip kama 3 zangu, hesabu zangu ya 500, alafu niingie kwa the next petrol station nipate hakuna. Unajua sasa inanifanya nimeanza kuwa na wasiwasi.
Drivers are now demanding answers from the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, warning that a prolonged shortage could hit the economy hard.
Sidhani vile mafuta inaweza kuwa tu imekosekana just all of a sudden. Na tunajua mafuta iko, so ni watutolee mafuta tuweze kusukuma nchi.
Even as motorists hope from one retail station to the other, Kiharu MP Ndindi Nyoro places the entire blame on the government, warning that any price hike will only deepen the burden on Kenyans. Nyoro now wants government to cushion Kenyans.
And the sooner they do it, the better. because Kenyans will force you to receipt the 7 shillings fuel levy. Kenyans will force you soon to receipt the 8% additional VAT that was introduced. Kenyans cannot shoulder the fuel price disruptions on their own.
Nyoro insists that Kenya's fuel prices is ranking high in the region as a result of taxation by government, making the fuel prices twice expensive at the pump.
It is a crisis that will affect our economy, and it is very disappointing to see that leaders are prioritizing doing politics and sending photos of crowds to soothe their egos when there is a critical issue that needs to be sorted.
EPRA says any dealer found hoarding fuel will face penalties, including license revocation. Melita Olitenges, Citizen TV.
Business News, brought to you by Safaricom Business.
Keep business growing with calling, texting, and SMS. Stay connected with customers and suppliers with Zidisha Plus voice and data. Join Safaricom Business today and power your progress.
National carrier Kenya Airways has slipped back into losses, posting a 17.2 billion shillings net loss in 2025 as grounded aircraft, rising costs and global disruptions take a heavy toll on its operations. The setback comes just a year after the airline returned to profitability, underscoring the fragile nature of its recovery journey. Here now is Jasmine Wamboi with the details.
Kenya Airways returned to the red in 2025, posting an operating loss of 5.6 billion shillings as total costs outpaced revenues in a difficult operating environment.
Today, we are reporting the results that reflect a challenging year for Kenya Airways. Our financial performance is not where we want it to be, and we take full accountability for that.
The airline generated 161 billion shillings in revenue during the year, but spent more than 167 billion shillings to keep operations running. At the heart of the downturn is reduced capacity driven by the grounding of 3 Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft.
We had a number of fleet grounded, especially our wide-body aircraft, and these are the money minders or the money makers in the industry.
Ongoing global supply chain disruptions have made it harder and more expensive to access spare parts and engine overhauls, keeping aircraft out of service for longer. These aircraft, while not flying, continue to attract heavy costs, including maintenance, storage, and lease obligations.
I can confirm that we have 2 grounded still AOG waiting for the engines, the ones I spoke about in my presentation. So the engines are coming. First 2 engines are coming in April. So by the end of April, the first aircraft should be up and flying, and the second aircraft should be up. So we have 1 more engine is coming in May. Second engine is coming in June.
At the same time, geopolitical tensions across key aviation routes are also forcing airlines to take longer flight paths, pushing up fuel consumption in a sector where fuel accounts for up to 40% of operating costs.
As you know, markets ebb and they flow, as do enterprises. So this is just a low period, but that we will be certainly looking forward to a far more optimistic result in the coming financial years.
Financing costs have further compounded the strain, with interest expenses exceeding 12 billion shillings, driving the airline to a net loss of 17.2 billion shillings. This is a sharp reversal from the 5.4 billion shillings profit recorded in 2024. The airline's balance sheet remains under pressure, with liabilities continuing to outweigh assets, leaving it in a negative equity position.
Our immediate priority is to stabilize operations, rebuild on capacity. As the CEO had earlier said, keep a keen eye on cost control.
Jasmine Wamboi, Citizen TV.
Kenya has significantly strengthened its insurance safety net, doubling compensation for policyholders to 500,000 shillings in a move aimed at restoring trust and cushioning victims following the collapse of their underwriters. The Policyholders Compensation Fund, PCF, noting that the 250,000 shillings set in 2017 and 100,000 in 2010 have been overtaken by time. The fund, which steps in when insurers fail, says it has handled over 206 litigation cases in the last year, with nearly 70% of claimants being third-party victims, further highlighting the broader economic fallout when insurance firms collapse. Current PCF says it has built its financial muscle to enhance coverage and meaningful protection, noting that it now covers over 18.3% of the entire industry exposure. Now, these reforms come as Kenya's insurance sector shows signs of growth, but also persistent fragility.
And it has continued to grow steadily from the initial seed capital of 35 billion that was put in by the National Treasury up to the current fund value, which is about 38 billion. The compensation of policyholders has been a bit slow, but I must commend the PCF for the work that they have done in the recent past. I know the demands that we've placed on them has been quite huge, but I must say that they have acted quite well and responded to the call of policyholders.
The new limit is grounded in actual evidence and aims to provide meaningful relief to affected policy holders during difficult transitions. Extensive discussions with the National Treasury informed this reform, which address social, macroeconomics, and macroeconomic factors. The increase is expected to raise the fund coverage from about 30 to 60% of average claim value.
Staying in the insurance sector, brokers have now challenged the relevant stakeholders, including government and the regulator, to urgently fix gaps in the sector, warning that weak policies and low public confidence continue to slow insurance uptake in the country. The Association of Insurance Brokers of Kenya says reforms are critical to unlocking growth and protecting businesses and households. Dennis Otieno reports.
Insurance brokers are piling pressure on authorities to address long-standing weaknesses affecting the sector. The Association of Insurance Brokers of Kenya says regulatory gaps and inconsistent enforcement have undermined trust and slowed expansion. The concern coming just weeks after the Insurance Regulatory Authority placed 3 firms under statutory management.
Now, under statutory management, the Policyholders Compensation Fund will come in to take over, and even at the time of liquidation, possibly they will pay something small to the policyholders. But the challenge we've gotten now is where you have a customer who has paid full premium today, and tomorrow the company is put under receivership. That customer loses totally the entire premium that he paid. So we have no mechanism of a refund to the unutilized premium that the customer had paid.
They note that insurance penetration in Kenya remains low at a paltry 3%, with many individuals and small businesses still operating without adequate cover.
We've always strived to make our population aware and to recognize the importance of insurance. We have tried tremendously to do that, but still not good enough. So we are still making efforts to improve the penetration through education, training.
The association is now calling for urgent policy reforms to strengthen oversight, enhance transparency, and create a more enabling environment for intermediaries.
I wish there would be a way also in regulation that a company will be given kind of a phased out closure so that you are able to know this company is trading. There should be a way that the brokers and members of public are able to see it coming, that this company is having a challenge. Of course, the experienced brokers will have an idea, but I'm worried about the members of public.
At the same time, the brokers are pushing for affordable and inclusive insurance products tailored to the needs of ordinary Kenyans in a bid to drive uptake and deepen financial inclusion. Dennis Otieno, Citizen TV.
Business News, brought to you by Safaricom Business.
Keep business growing with calling, texting, and SMS. Stay connected with customers and suppliers with Zidisha Plus voice and data. Join Safaricom Business today and power your progress.
And just a reminder that we're going to be speaking with the IEBC on voter registration. Keep your questions coming. But first, let's get into the day's sports news. The national football team, the Harambee Stars, have arrived in Kigali, Rwanda for the FIFA Series tournament that kicks off on Friday. The Stars will open the tournament against European side Estonia. Coach Benny McCarthy held only one training session in Nairobi on Monday, and then the team departed for Rwanda early Tuesday morning. McCarthy has made several last-minute changes to the squad. Up to 10 players are out injured, including goalkeeper Brian Omondi, defenders Eric Ouma, Joseph Okumu, Sylvester Owino, and Collins Sichenje, Tyler Onyango, Andre Gitau, Adam Wilson, Jonah Oyunga and captain Michael Olunga are also out injured. Goalkeeper Farouk Shikalo, defender Mike Kibwage, and forward Ben Stanley are late call-ups that travelled with the team. Now, still on the FIFA series, Kenya will host one of the women tournaments in April featuring Australia, India and Malawi. Kenya will play India in the second match after Australia face off against Malawi, both matches at the Nyayo National Stadium. The announcement was made by Sports Cabinet Secretary Salim Vuria.
This is not a qualifier. It is, of course, to be played in the friendly window, but it has never happened in the history of Kenyan football. And it is also a privilege since this is the first time that the series has been launched by FIFA for women, and we are happy to be part of this initiative.
So once again, the world and the continent, they bear witness, to Kenya's consistent and proven track record, affirming our position as a trusted destination for global sports. This confidence is anchored in our demonstrated ability to host and deliver world-class, top-tier sporting events that not only showcase our immense talent, but they also bring the diversity and the strategic location for Kenya as a magical and the origin of wonder.
The All-Africa Junior Team Golf Championship teed off today at the Windsor Golf and Country Club, with the weather playing hide-and-seek with the golfers. Different weather conditions switching from rain and hot sun at intervals affected most of the golfers from 14 countries across Africa. At the end of the day, South Africa ruled on both fronts, their boys' team taking a commanding 8 shots lead over hosts Kenya, while their girls' team has a massive 11 shots lead over Kenya. Mauritius sits third in the boys' standings, followed by Uganda and Morocco to close the top 5. On the girls' side, Tunisia is third, only 1 stroke ahead of Morocco in 4th, as Zimbabwe lies 5th. In the individual golfers' standings, Kenya's Sonny Sevi is second on the leaderboard, having played level par today. He picked 2 birdies that were wiped out by 2 bogeys. Junaid Manji is tied for 5th position, while Mwathi Gisheru and Yuvraj Rajput are tied for 8th. On the girls' side, Bianca Ngechu is 3rd, followed by Kanana Mudhomi in 4th, while teammate Belinda Wanjiro is tied for 8th.
Yeah, I played pretty okay. Just had 2 bogeys, 2 birdies. The rest was all just pretty much regulation golf. Just hit green, 2-putt, and move on to the next hole.
It was a bit shaky in the beginning, but I managed to stabilize myself. Just a few careless mistakes here and there, but definitely learned from them.
It was a good day one from the team. I feel like we played a lot more conservative today.
Tomorrow game plan is definitely gonna change, and I just hope for the best tomorrow. Hopefully I don't do the mistakes I did on the back nine, and I think I should be fine.